Last week in Melbourne, Australia, a caricature of Serena Williams was featured with embellished facial features and an aggressive stance. Many people saw that as Jim Crow racism, while others, or the artist specifically, Mark Knight, saw nothing wrong with what he showed. Millions of dollars were moved from FEMA to ice removal operations just before Florence hit. Political headlines from our current politicians, those who have been elected and those who are or will be appointed, can be found such as, "It was just locker room talk," or "That accusation doesn't really matter because the attempt at assault did not actually go anywhere." The Black Lives Matter movement was made popular and was brought on because of an increased presence and exposure of the police brutality that was occurring and continues to occur. All of these are examples of media headlines that perpetuate bias and encourage society to look differently at groups of people. None of these are new, but we've seen a sharp increase in blatantly discriminatory comments, and that is where the title of the talk becomes evident. When implicit bias becomes explicit. All of us in this room are biased. Now, I know I might have hit a nerve with some of you for saying that, but it is true. Every single one of us hold bias within ourselves. It is human and natural. I've been doing the work for over 20 years. I still hold bias. Everyone in this room holds that bias. It's simple fact and human nature to have that. That bias, that implicit bias that you hold, though, is not harmful unless you allow it to change the way you treat people or how you speak to people, because that is when implicit bias becomes explicit and discriminatory. My passion in life and my focus is working with people to help them understand their bias, embrace their bias, so that they can ultimately overcome that before it becomes discriminatory, and also so that they can become more productive and ultimately profitable individuals. Our bias stems from experiences. Our livelihoods have all been what they are, and you are who you are right now sitting in these chairs and listening to this because of experiences that you've had. Whether it's your upbringing, whether it is the media that you choose to surround yourself with, whether it is your friends and colleagues that you choose to surround yourself with. You are who you are sitting in this chair today because of the experiences you've had. And those experiences encourage you and allow you to have that bias or that internal frame in your head thinking about what you think about certain groups of people and certain individuals. I use an analogy about baggage because we all carry different baggage. All of us had a different experience this morning coming in. Some of us came in with Louis Vuitton, some of us came in with a Target knockoff, and some of us might have came in with a little plastic knapsack from the grocery store up the street. We all carry our own baggage. As adults, we can choose to unpack that baggage, analyze the baggage, and repack, go out and buy a different outfit, go out and figure out a new experience, or reframe our mind because of the experiences we want to have. As adults, we have that luxury. Unfortunately, our children don't have that luxury. Their baggage is often packed for them. The first step in any of this bias work is to unpack your own baggage and recognize what you have in that bag. What do you carry around with you every day? What do you put in that storage unit and leave and forget it's even there? And what have you left behind or sold to someone else? But you must analyze the baggage that you carry in order to overcome it. And that first step is extremely difficult because you have to accept that you're biased. Bias is defined as prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group of people. Implicit bias is our internal thinkings. What do you feel? What do you think? Who do you prefer to be around? Who do you associate with? What do you like to get? What do you like to order at the restaurant? Those are all preferences. You might have a bias towards Coke versus Pepsi. That's a bias. If your first question walking into a restaurant is, do you have Coke or Pepsi? We have Pepsi. Ooh, I'll take an iced tea. That's a bias. It doesn't mean that you're downing all the people that drink Coke. You're not saying anything negative about people who drink Coke. That's where that bias is simply that, a bias. It can be seen as a preference, and it's not necessarily negative. It's when you act on implicit bias and say, I can't believe you have Pepsi. How dare you have Pepsi? You all should go to heck. This is horrible. That's when you're acting on a bias, and that's when it becomes negative. Or when you start to tell people that they're horrible people for drinking a certain product or acting a certain way. When you're condemning others, that's when it becomes explicit. That's when it becomes discriminatory, and that's when it becomes harmful. Our bias typically starts with microaggressions. Microaggressions are comments that are typically made by people who mean nothing but the best. They're usually well-intentioned people, and I often say that the most well-intentioned people often do the most harm because they don't realize the harm that they're causing. But some examples of microaggressions that I'm sure some people in here have used at some point, but if you've ever looked at a pregnant woman and asked her if she was taking time off after the baby without asking the others who will be raising that child in that situation the same question, you're showing sexist tendencies. The time after birth was not given to recover the body. That's part of it, but the time after birth was given to bond with the child. So if you're only asking the person who's carrying the child, then you're saying that only the woman deserves that time. If you automatically walk into a room with a phone that doesn't work and you ask the youngest person in the room, help me, without asking who has experience or who might be able to help, you're showing ageist tendencies. You're assuming that because they're young, they must be able to help with IT. If you've ever been in a classroom or had a friend in a math class who is Asian and you automatically ask them for help with your math homework, you're showing racist tendencies. None of these are negative, right? I would love to be good at math. I would love to be great at technology. Microaggressions don't always start as negative. What makes them harmful is that you're grouping people by who they are in an identity group rather than who they are within themselves. You're making assumptions on someone based on what they are, what group they belong to, and not who they are internally or what they bring to the table. I'd like to share a personal story with you. I have a biracial son, and we were in the office, in the doctor's office, the pediatrician. He was about 2 years old for his 2-year-old vaccinations. And I was talking to another mother in the waiting room. It was going pretty well, good conversation. Probably about 3 or 4 minutes in, she asked me, when did you adopt him? And I said, oh no, he's mine, thinking, he's just so cute, she doesn't think I could make him, right? And she goes, oh no, I know he's yours now, but when did you sign the papers? I said, oh no, I birthed him. And then she lowered her voice, like it was a secret or scandalous, and said, but he's black. You did that on purpose? Well, let me tell you that I had to harness every single ounce of my crucial conversations training, my bias trainings, my equity and inclusion trainings, and wow, I should have won an Emmy for how I responded to this one. But I did. And I simply told her that no, he was mine. His father and I were deeply in love, and he's the best thing that ever happened to me. By the end of the conversation, she was in tears. Not because I came at her, not because I was negative or atrocious in any way, but because I helped her recognize her bias. See, she didn't think that anything she said was negative. She was thinking, well, in my head, the only thing that I would think of is that it must not have been by choice, or that's not really what happens, because that's what she was exposed to. That was her exposure, that was her bias, that was what was running through her head over and over. By the end of the conversation, she was in tears, and I have to admit I might have dropped one, right? And it was simply because we had the opportunity to talk and overcome the biases. She had to recognize and understand that she had that bias so that she could overcome it. And she promised me at the end of it that she would do her best not to make that same mistake again, and that she appreciated me taking the time to talk to her about it rather than getting angry and walking away. But that implicit bias went from a microaggression of, when did you adopt him, to a blatant discriminatory comment, back to a, oh wow, I've understood what I've said and I'm sorry for hurting you. That's what we need to do to be able to have those conversations so that we can move past, because we all make mistakes. We all have first impressions, we all have biased thoughts. That is human. But we have to be able to communicate with each other so that we can overcome those throughout our process. Once you've actually realized that you are biased, that is when you can overcome so that you can speak differently in the whole situation. I benefit from being born into a white suburban family. Yep, I said the word benefit. That is a privilege that I have. I own my white privilege. I didn't earn it, but I have privileges that come along with that. I'm not followed while I'm shopping. I'm not pulled over while I'm driving, unless, of course, I'm doing my Danica trick because I do really like to drive fast. But even if I am pulled over, I'm usually let go with a warning. Being white does not define me. It doesn't define who I am, but it is often the first thing that people notice about me. I've been doing equity and inclusion trainings for quite a while. I will tell you the first thing I get is, a white woman doing this work? What? But as soon as I start talking and I start to recognize and also appreciate not only the biases that I hold, but the privileges that I hold, and I help people in the room recognize that I'm not here to tell anyone that they're wrong. I'm here to tell you that it's human and natural. Own your bias. That's when the credibility comes up, and that's when I'm able to make an impact. And that's how every single person can make an impact, is by recognizing the bias so that they can own it and then overcome it. Because you cannot overcome or get over anything that you don't recognize in the first place. There's lots of examples of privilege. There's white privilege, there's male privilege, there's Christian privilege, there's heterosexual privilege. The list goes on. Not only does everyone in this room hold bias, but everyone in this room holds a privilege of some sort. I encourage all of you to identify not only your bias, but also what privilege you hold. Spark that conversation, because once you recognize, you can overcome. Okay? Now, I'm sure that there's some of you in your own internal thinkings, your own implicit bias right now, you're probably talking to me. And you're saying one of a couple things. And one of those things that you might be saying is, this isn't today's reality. We've become so much more diverse. Why do we have to keep talking about it? Okay? You're right. We've become much more diverse. But we've also become much more polarized. All you have to do is look at the media headlines to see that. We have become more polarized because people have become empowered to not only speak their minds, which again, speaking their minds is not the problem if you're speaking simply about you. But when you condemn others, that is when it becomes a problem. Social media has allowed this negativity to be spread quicker and to larger demographics. Or you might be thinking, bias is not normal and I am not biased, gosh darn it. I get that a lot. Guess what? Hate me if you want. You're biased. Every single room, every single person out there is biased. Everyone holds a preference. Every single one of you. Your first thought when you look at someone is your bias. When you chose where to sit today, you chose to sit right next to someone or to have a spot open. You chose whether you want to sit in the front or in the back. That is your preference. Your bias is, ooh, looking at the pictures of different people, ooh, he looks interesting, or ooh, she looks weird, or, because I'm the only girl in them, or he looks really young, I wonder what he's going to talk about, right? We all have them. Every single person in here is biased. Hate me if you want, it's okay. I'd rather be loved and hated than just somewhere in the middle. Or you might be thinking, I'm glad I'm not biased. I treat everyone the same. Oh, gee, Zooks. You should not treat everyone the same. We are all unique individuals. None of us should be treated the same because none of us are the exact same person. We all have different needs and wants in this world. We all have different ways we learn, different ways we respond. We are all unique. Equal and equitable are not the same. We don't need to treat everyone equally because that's treating everyone the same. We need to treat everyone equitably, which means we give them access to the ability to be successful and prosperous. We don't give everyone the same thing because we don't all need the same thing. I'm going to give all of you in here a Diet Pepsi. There are some people in here who are going to throw that Diet Pepsi at me. I would be one of them that would say, I don't want it either. Equal is not equitable. And I know it sounds trivial to bring it back to things like soda or the color of car you drive, but it's that right there. If you can embrace that, then you can understand and embrace how this can move forward into much larger things. And the last thing that some of you might be thinking is, my religion doesn't allow me to accept certain lifestyles. Fair. I'm not here to change your core values or beliefs. You can hold on to your core values and your core beliefs, but that does not mean that you have the opportunity or you should be able to condemn anyone else for theirs. Own your core values and beliefs. Own what you feel. That doesn't mean that you have to tell others that they're wrong because they don't fit into your core values. We've all heard the saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. We've all heard that. But somehow down the line, because people in power feel empowered to say what they want to say, we feel like all of us have the ability to say what we want to say. And yes, free speech, I get it. But if you're condemning people in the process of that free speech, you're no longer allowing it to be a free society for everyone else who's just trying to live their life. Now again, the purpose of the talk today is to get you all mad at me. I want you all to think, how dare she call me biased? I'm not biased, she doesn't even know me. Yep. I want you to own the fact that you are biased. I am biased. We are all biased. We should not work to eradicate that bias. Rather, we need to work to identify it so that we can overcome it. We have to embrace the fact that we're all biased. We have to identify what our biases are, and then we have to work to overcome. Thank you so much, and remember that in order to unite society, we must first understand ourselves.